You are live. So you may begin.
Oh, hello, dear friends. Greetings from Cherwell College, Oxford, and welcome to Virtual Open Days with our academic team. Just a brief introduction about us. Cherwell College, Oxford is a pre-university tutorial college. It offers one-to-one and small group tuition in a range of A levels and GCSEs. The focus is very much on the individual, which makes the college highly desirable to students looking to study at their own pace or retake subjects. The college can accept both home and international students throughout the year. It is a bespoke co-educational boarding and day school for A-level and GCSE students in the heart of Oxford. Whether you're intending to study or retake A-levels or GCSEs, Cherwell College, Oxford could be the perfect place for you. Everyone's educational journey is different, so we do recognize that no two students are the same. Discover our personalized approach to education and many opportunities which our college can offer. We are honored to introduce our high-caliber senior tutor in history and philosophy, Joshua Roberts, who would share his vision about the teaching methods at Cherwell. Hello, Joshua. Nice to see you.
Hello,
We
Helen.
have hello. So, we have been working with you for several successful years, and our students highly evaluate your method of teaching history in the context of modern world understanding. Our audience would very much appreciate your professional overview on how we teach history at Cherwell.
Well, thank you, Helen. I appreciate the introduction. The approach we take at Charwell College, and particularly the way I approach it, is linked to the fact that we're in Oxford itself. So we're in the city of Oxford, which is famous for having a university, a very famous old 800-year-old university. And one of the things Oxford is famous for at the university level is what's called the Oxford tutorial system. And this makes Oxford and places like Cambridge as well a little bit unique compared to many universities in the world, because basically you get a lot more individual one-to-one attention. So in the Oxford tutorial system, you would often hand in some work each week, and then you'd go through it with your tutor and kind of dig into it and see what can be improved, or where there are areas for getting things better. And so at Charwell, a pre-university college in Oxford, we're replicating that approach. So you already get that in preparation for university or other endeavors later on. So the one-to-one approach is very much a big opportunity for you. It means you're not just in a class filled out with lots of people. That can have good things too. But with the one-to-one approach or the small group approach, you get a lot more time to question things, to dig into things, to find out and clarify things from a teacher, an expert in your area, in history in this case. So basically you can call that dialectic. And dialectic is the idea of two or more people engaging with each other in a close, sometimes intense way. And that enables you to really understand things and to be pushed to understand. You don't necessarily get away with things too easily. You're being made to defend your ideas, and not in an aggressive way, but just kind of taking ownership of where you're at and what you need to improve and what things you're still trying to work out. And so that method's also a bit challenging. It's something that's challenging in a good way, though. It pushes you to be better. That can also be called, by the way, the Socratic dialogue method. So if we go right back to the beginning of the Western world as we know it, we go back to the ancient Greeks, particularly the city of Athens, And one of the most famous teachers in ancient Athens was called Socrates. And his method was something like what I just described, a dialogue, a challenge, a kind of interplay between two or more people, really trying to get to the truth of something, what's actually there, what's really going on. And that method he began has been imbued into the education system of the Western world ever since. And even the word, take a simple word like academic or academy, that actually comes from the pupil of Socrates, another famous person called Plato, who invented the academy. So when we say academic, we're going right back to that original foundation of the term and the word. So yeah, so Oxford University, other great Russell Group universities, liberal arts universities in America as well, very much believe in this method. They use it. It's part and parcel of really extending yourself into a deeper, wider level of learning. So we use that approach here at Charwell with our history course. And then we also have different syllabuses because they have specific assessment criteria. One of the syllabuses we often focus on here is the Cambridge International syllabus for A-level or for GCSE. And that's a particularly good syllabus. It has lots of really good components to it. And it's also a touch easier in terms of whether you have to do coursework or not. Some of the other boards, history boards, you have to do a coursework component. With the CIE one, there's a choice whether to do that or not. So it just gives you a bit more flexibility. Now, what do you get in a Cambridge International history course, say for A-level? Well, there's 4 components. The first 2 components are really geared towards just opening up your mind to the skills of history. So in that part of the course, you would grapple with what's called second order reasoning. That is to say, big picture stuff. How do things link together? A-level history is trying to push you to see the bigger picture, that there's all sorts of things that link in a synoptic manner. That's the term used for that, synoptic. So, for example, you can do something called the international option. And given we're in the modern world, where did the modern world begin? That might be a question, right? Well, some of it does go back before the Industrial Revolution, but a big part of it's actually the 19th century. And you get this big, huge thing called the Industrial Revolution. And it's well named. It is a revolution, and we live in its image today. And so the international option actually looks at the effects of the Industrial Revolution on the whole world. In a sense, the empires that come out of Europe in the latter half of the 19th century, particularly, the reason they're so powerful and they have such an effect on the whole world is because of the industrial technology they have. And so that's a really useful thing to start to understand and to look at how the world we're in today connects to this big shift and change going on. And of course, after the empires of Europe spread around the world then responds. And one example would be the response of Asia, which is playing out as we speak. If we think of how important China is today, that's one example. But go back a bit earlier, the first kind of Asian nation that's a bit like China is Japan. Japan kind of adapts to the Industrial Revolution, the first Asian nation to do that on a big level, and becomes a competitor with the empires and powers of the Western world. So that's another thing you could dig into and find out more about. And just very quickly, a very important skill in history, particularly at A level, it's also true at GCSE, is interpretation. How do you interpret sources of information? What are the implications or the inferences of them? Why do historians disagree on some things? There's actually a lot of history which is filled with opinions and positions and disagreements. And that's very real world. When you're in the real world, it's not a world of just facts. It's a world of knowledge at the cutting edge. And at the cutting edge, it's filled with interpretation, disagreement, argument. You have to learn how to analyze that argument and then also give your opinion on some issues that are a bit debatable. What do you think and why? That starts to come in.
Thank you so much. In today's AI reality, some people doubt if history remains the core subject. Could it compete with ChatGPT? What is your opinion about modern principles of teaching history? How could this subject facilitate future employment of our students?
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, that's a very important question, very topical and very relevant. It is important to acknowledge that AI is around and that some of these research engines like ChatGPT or Grok or some of the other ones that are around, they are quite powerful research tools, and they're very good at collating information together. And so that's true. They are good at that. However, what those AI engines assume is a certain level of education on the part of the person reading it. So if you could tell it to explain something as to a child, and it would do that. But if you wanted to go deeper into those ideas, it's expecting you to be able to be someone who knows how to understand those ideas. And you can't really very easily do that unless you do the hard work yourself. But a college like Charwell, with its one-to-one or small group system, is a place where you can do that in a much more guided and intense way, where someone who's done it before, has done the hard work, can give you bits and pieces of understanding and knowledge that you have not considered before or have not developed before. So really, history is a very ideal subject for that. It's particularly challenging for AI to compete with that ability for a human teacher or tutor to really get you to understand something properly and to also realize the limits of factual understanding, to realize where you have to start to interpret, look at what's possible, argue for things, start to take opinions and positions on real world complex issues that are really there. History is just an indication of that being true through all time, that we're always on the edge of what we know, as it were. And that's true today, it's true in the past, and history helps you to discern that, how to actually make that clear in your mind. And then in terms of a career, well, particularly in the corporate world, the business world, the professional world, your ability to break information down, to understand the patterns in it, to be able to communicate what the complexities of that are, that's something you need to learn how to do yourself. You can't just expect a chat GPT AI to do that for you. If nothing else, it'll look a bit obvious to people who are educated that that's what you're doing. You're using an AI to do it. So they will see that, and that will lower the respect that you get, because they'll see you're not doing, you haven't done the hard work yourself. You're not able to, bring together arguments, ideas yourself, right? So yes, in that sense, history is very important. It teaches you how to write, how to communicate, how to argue, how to back things up, how to evidence things. And it also teaches you what the cutting edge of knowledge is, which is debatable, complex, interpretational, not just factual, goes well beyond the factual. Just to give an example of that, if I said, did World War I happen? That would be a factual answer. You just say yes. And then there's not much more to say, is there? It's kind of like, yeah, okay, great, move on. If you said, why did the First World War happen? Suddenly you're actually dealing with a real question, or it could be World War II. Either of those wars, why did they happen? And that also is very debatable, isn't it? There's going to be so many complex things going on there that different historians will have different views on exactly why that's happened. And that is true in other subjects as well, and other areas of knowledge, including the business world. So, so history will help you keep at the cutting edge of things, actually. It'll help you keep at the cutting edge of communication, how to think, how to write well, how to be critical. And it stops you just being possessed by the world and the knowledge that people fling around without always thinking it through very well.
Thank you. Our followers are interested in the main differences if taken a 2-year A-level history in comparison with a 1-year fast-track course. Could you expand?
Yeah, no problem, Helen. I can give a picture of that. So the first option, the fast-track course, would be 1 year. And of course, the course is designed as a 2-year course. So if you're doing it in 1 year, you can definitely do that, and it might really suit you. And that's particularly suitable if you have already achieved very well at history, GCSE, say, maybe you're at the very top end of that. And if you're a very independent learner, so you want to take hold of your learning, you want to own it, you want to push ahead, do lots of reading, do lots of research, do lots of study, and then have me or someone like me as a facilitator, as a tutor or teacher who helps you out when you reach points that are a bit harder to get through, and gives feedback and looks at your essays and closely kind of shows you how to improve them. But in a sense, you own the course and you kind of take leadership of it and push into the depths of it, with me as the facilitator of that. Now, if you do the 2-year course, that is what the course is designed to be, a 2-year course. The first year is designed as a kind of entry then. It's like the entry into the joy of history, the joy of the past, the joy of learning, the joy of getting your thinking better, the joy of digging in deeper into things, growing up a bit, like realizing that the things you learned in school before weren't actually as deep as you really thought they might be. There's a lot more going on, actually. And so it just enables you to flow into that, take it on board, process it, a bit more teacher-led, more time with your classes, with the teacher. And then you get your summer break and you kind of got a chance just to mature, take on board everything you've learned. And then you come back for your second year. And in that second year, you hit the intensity then. You start to take much more ownership of the course, more independent study. Plus, you go into the deeper parts of the course, the really difficult interpretation, paper 3, for example, where you've got to know specific schools of historical positions or thought on things like the Cold War, for example. And your paper 4 essays are much harder. They're like 30 marks instead of 20. And so suddenly you've got to go a bit deeper and think a bit deeper. So in that case, you've had time to, kind of work your way up to that. And then the last year, you've already got a lot of the background skills. So it's just a bit easier to slip into that, especially if that's the way you prefer learning. in a more teacher-led way.
Thank you so much. A lot of our Oxbridge applicants had previously asked us about HUT and its preparation. From 2025, history admission test is discontinued and not replaced. The test included primary sources from unfamiliar period of history followed by questions. It tested candidates' skills comprehension, analysis, and presentation skills. Could you share your vision about the possible test format in history if you consider it necessary?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, of course, it is being discontinued, but what it represents still carries on. So in the A-level history course, or if you do a GCSE course, you are going to have to engage with sources, sources of information, which could be posters, they could be photos, they could be diary entries, they could be texts, they could be archaeological items, all sorts of things that the past reveals about itself to us, trying to interpret and understand that. So that's a really big, important part of studying history anyway. And so the fact that was an admissions test for somewhere like Oxford shows that to you. Now, even though they've taken that requirement away, that doesn't mean the actual skills it was testing for will not be part of what you need to learn. So, just to give an example there, once you've learned how to pick up clues about sources from the past, sources of information, in a way you can apply that even if you're dealing with something a bit more unfamiliar. And so if you had, say, a poster, the way it's constructed or the way it's laid out, or some of the character traits in the eye or the expressions on people or the body language shown, or etc., those can convey possible meanings or probable meanings as well. Things that make most sense, that it seems like that's what the source is trying to do. And you would have to talk that way. You have to talk with the language of inference, And that is to say, you're looking for what is implied or what's possible in things. It's a bit like reading the world symbolically. In some periods of history, symbolic reading of things was very, very widespread. We're probably in a period of history that's a bit more literal. We tend to think more literally. And so actually getting away from literal thinking, literalist thinking, is one of the challenges of the future, arguably, something that we're going to have to be better at. And so the kind of way sources of information can be analyzed, dealt with, interpreted, the inference can be examined. That's something we'll do in the course anyway. And we'll have little one-to-one sessions or tests or moments where you do things a bit like HAT anyway. So don't just think, oh yeah, it doesn't matter anymore, but just think of it as something that is a good symbol, there's that word symbol, of the kinds of skills that really help you mature and grow as a learner, as a thinker, as a professional anyway.
Thank you, Joshua. In the modern world, progression routes are the core interest for the applicants who would like to choose history as a L-level subject. What do you think about it?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. That's also a very good question. It's really important to say that one of the subjects you can do at A-level that universities really rather think highly of is history. And one of the reasons for that is how history focuses on writing skills. So the essay format is a very widely recognized way of getting across your ideas to other people. a way of arguing for your ideas or explaining your ideas. And so the ability to be able to write in that format or in smaller formats as well, some paragraph skills, for example, or short answer skills are still useful. Or the ability to look at possible meanings and things, to get a text from someone, like an historian or a scholar, or even it could be a professional person, like a medical doctor or a businessman, and the ability to actually be able to kind of break those things down and dissect them and analyze them and then give opinions about them. Well, that's often what universities really want, even in other subjects. Even if you're not doing history at university, there's a component of the business world that wants you to be able to research and communicate ideas very well in a kind of recognized format. So in that sense, history remains vital to a career or subject like history at the very least, where you're doing essay or writing skills, learning how to communicate better. So yeah, thanks, Ellen.
Thank you so much. So, and now, thank you, Joshua. It's question time, and we've got one question. Do you have any book recommendations for students thinking about taking history for their A-levels?
Yes, I do have a few just starting recommendations. One really good, useful book to read would be called What is History? It's by a famous historian called E.W. Carr. And it's a good introduction to just trying to get to grips with what the subject is about and what it's trying to do. So I've just put that in the chat. Hopefully that can be seen. But yeah, it's called What is History? ? By E.W. Carr. Another book I could recommend, it goes a bit deeper though. So this is like philosophy of history. But if you wanted to challenge yourself a bit and go even deeper than What is History book by E.W. Carr, then there's another book called The Idea of History. And this is by a famous historian and philosopher of history called R.G. Collingwood. Collingwood was an Oxford man as well. So if you are venturing into the world of English historians at the top level of being historians, very highly regarded ones, most of them would very much know about this book called The Idea of History. So that just takes you a bit deeper. It's kind of almost psychology, really. It takes you into history as the idea of different periods of time where people have very particular ways of thinking, which are often very different to our own today. And that means we have a very particular way of thinking, which is very unique to our time. And in the future, they might think, whoa, that was a bit weird that they thought that way. So it helps you be much more reflective and to actually think a bit more correctly about history. Because one of the big problems students have is trying to think, hang on, the past is different to now. You've got to almost think of the past as being like visiting a foreign country. If you don't think that way, you're probably going to make lots of mistakes straight away and make lots of assumptions, which often are incorrect. So yeah, so those two are very good. And then another book, which is just quite useful for modern history, is called the Deluge, and the subtitle is The Great War, and that's by an historian called Adam Tooze. So I'll just put that in as well into the chat. So I'm just doing that now. Yeah, so Adam Tooze is a British historian, very well regarded, and one of the biggest events other than the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, really big event, that one. But other than that, the First World War, huge. Like there's just a different world before the First World War. Europe is very, very different. And there's a very different world after the First World War. We're living in the after the First World War period. So there's all sorts of particular assumptions that we have now, which most people didn't have before the First World War. And so it's a very useful book to just get the difference between pre-World War One and post-World War One. And then if you get that difference, it helps you understand it a lot better, and you tend to get much better marks because you're actually understanding the structure of the time you're looking at.
So you mean that reading around the subject, it's crucial and paramount for history students?
Yeah, it's very useful for second order reasoning, for getting a bigger picture. In the syllabus, it'll actually say, if you want to get to the top part of the mark scheme, you have to be able to show what's called second order reasoning. If you can't show that, your marks will actually be lower. You've got to get the bigger picture stuff, show that you understand it, provide context and complexity and nuance and change in continuities, it's sometimes called, in order to get top marks. Yeah. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Another question. Is there a recent shift towards a greater emphasis on modern history? Or do students still regularly opt for ancient or early historical periods as part of their A-level studies?
In the UK, there has been a shift towards modern history, and realistically, most British A-level students, the majority choose modern history. There's still a significant minority that, particularly in independent schools and the big public schools of Britain, still they might do Latin, or they might do classical civilization, it's called, or there is an actual ancient history syllabus, which does more than just the Greeks and Romans. It also does the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians and so on. So there's a significant minority that do that, but the majority do modern history. It does depend on the country, though. I'm from Australia originally. In Australia, it's about even. You know, if you go to the equivalent of A levels in Australia, half the students are doing ancient history, the other half do modern history. And in a sense, that is correct, I would argue. It doesn't really matter too much which one you do if you're just focused on the skills that you get from doing history. If you're a bit kind of, I really want to know the modern world properly, then of course you should do the modern history more. If you want to understand the foundations of most of the things we actually do, though, you actually have to go back to the ancient world, because all sorts of ideas we have come from them. And if you don't understand that, that can be limiting, actually. So ancient history can be a real enlightening thing to do. Opens up a lot more things than modern history sometimes.
And we see greetings from Wrocław, Poland, a city full of history from World War II. Great stream. Thank you. Thank you, Joshua.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, if we have any? Oh, actually, I don't see anything. Okay, so Joshua, thank you so much. And dear friends, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Joshua at Cherwell. If you would like to get more information about us, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, join us for open virtual days, which will still continue, or email our admission team. And we are rolling out a special offer for August, September. Please book a consultation scanning the QR code, which you see on the screen. Thank you, Joshua, again. It was very pleasant and interesting to see you and hear your views. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Very much appreciated. Cheers.
Great pleasure.